right now. Coverage you can count on. This is KTAB News at 6.
Good evening. Thank you for choosing KTAB News for a KTAB News special report tonight. I'm Bob Bartlett.
And I'm Joni McKinnon.
I think 7 out of 10 pills that we find during traffic stops, there's going to be fentanyl, some amount of fentanyl in those.
Fentanyl is touching the criminal community in a way that no other drug has ever touched in my years of experience, and we've got to put an end to it.
It's the leading cause of accidental overdoses in the United States.
Even suspect your kids of doing drugs, intervene.
According to the Drug Enforcement Agency, fentanyl is the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45.
Abilene and the Big Country are not immune from this drug. An Abilene woman chronicles her addiction while delivering a powerful message. KTAB's Victor Sotelo has her story.
It's day-to-day normal on the surface of Abilene streets. But scratch that surface. The streets are talking.
The stuff I've seen,
It's where we met Jennifer Jowers.
it's not safe to be on the streets of Abilene.
Walking down one of those Abilene streets.
Being on drugs is,
State Street in North Abilene, to be specific.
it's hard because you're only chasing that. That's all you chase. It's just the high.
Jennifer grew up here in Anson, just north of Abilene. She graduated from Anson High School at the age of 16, but by the time she was 18, she already had children, and she found herself in prison on a theft charge.
I just kind of gave up on life, gave up on everything, and just really went nose deep into my addiction.
Despite her years of drug use, it was only a couple of years ago that she was introduced to fentanyl. She thought she was using meth.
It's 3 times stronger. It makes you sick. Makes you feel like you're dying.
She eventually got out of prison after a short stint, got her kids back, and even went to a couple of years of college. She wanted to be in forensics, but her battle with drugs continued, and she found herself in Abilene in 2018 on the streets for the first time. Jennifer says she's now 40, and this is where she sleeps, on these steps over the Mockingbird underpass, under the train tracks. A lot of people in Abilene don't even know that these steps are here, but you can see that it's very popular with the homeless, so she can't always sleep here. She also says since that day when she detoxed just up the road from here, she's seen fentanyl take its toll on Abilene. In recent months, 8 of her friends have died.
Chloe, she was 18 years old. She was, she didn't even get to live her life, and she died of it. They said a heroin overdose.
Jennifer says she's holding out hope for herself and says there's still time for her, and has this message.
If you even suspect your kids of doing drugs, intervene. Period. Anybody. If you care about them, intervene.
Jennifer's story is just a quick listen.
There's something in it. There's something, I don't know what it is, but
into what Abilene streets are saying.
It'll eat holes in you, pretty much.
Just below the surface. In Abilene, with coverage you can count on, I'm Victor Sotelo.
We need your support to make any changes in this community to help our kids.
You'll be hearing more powerful words just like that tonight from emotional mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, and other relatives and friends. But we hear from a grieving mother speaking at an Abilene City Council meeting.
Crystal Lewis, the mother of Jaron Hernandez. Jaron passing away late last year around Christmas, a fentanyl overdose. Since then, Crystal and many of Jaron's extended family coming together creating Jaron's Hope, an organization for teens battling addiction. Jaron's mother asking the Abilene City Council to support the fight against addictive drugs.
But the thing is now with fentanyl, it's killing them. Addiction is so much more serious now because of fentanyl. I want you to start hearing about this because we need your support to make any changes in this community to help our kids.
While Jaron's hope is still in its early stages, the plan is to build a facility dedicated to helping 12 to 17-year-olds who struggle with addiction. Designing the proposed building right now.
Coming up on Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, several things you may not know about the deadly drug.
Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, presented by Taylor Alliance for Prevention and Prevention Resource Center, Abilene.
Fentanyl, a drug you've likely heard mentioned more and more throughout the past few years in hospitals with controlled administration, and of course in schools and on the streets with rampant illegal distribution. Perhaps you've even lost a family member or friend in its senseless rise to the top of the federal watch lists. But what is it, and why do some choose to use it if it's known to be so deadly? KTAB's Noah McKinney sets out to clarify that answer in simple terms, speaking with a county official on the front line fight and researching the origins, rise, and infamous reign of this single drug epidemic.
What is fentanyl? You know it by name.
Fentanyl has been a game changer. It's kind of in a lane of its own.
You've watched it spread.
It's cheaply made and manufactured. It's being pushed in high quantities.
It really is an American tragedy.
No matter where you're at, no matter what small town you're in, fentanyl is there.
And you've heard stories or maybe even experienced the heartache it's caused.
This is real, and this can happen to anybody.
Parents would come home and find a dead 14-year-old or 12-year-old in their bedroom. Didn't take their life on purpose, but they were just trying out a pill.
But where did it come from? Why do people use it? How has it spread, and why now? Let's start from the beginning. What is fentanyl?
It's basically a synthetic narcotic that's made in a laboratory.
And it's been around for longer than you might think. First developed in a Belgian lab in the 1960s, fentanyl is a synthetic or man-made opioid used clinically for decades to treat severe pain. The issues arise when that substance is obtained without prescription.
We preach this message all the time. We don't take anything that hasn't been given to you by a pharmacist or a doctor.
Texas Department of Public Safety Sergeant Mark Couch saying the potency of the drug has even changed how searches are conducted.
Like a powder that gets in the air, you can quickly be overdosed.
50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times that of morphine, a fatal dose of fentanyl measures just 2 milligrams. But if it's been around for decades, why is it only now that we're seeing this rise in prevalence? It begins in the 1990s with what the Center for Disease Control calls the 3 waves of the opioid overdose epidemic. Pills like OxyContin were more widely prescribed for pain relief, and addiction took hold. In the 2010s, access to these substances was more heavily restricted, leading dealers and users to turn to heroin in search of that high, a high that can be manufactured much more cheaply with fentanyl.
What we've seen in the last, say, 3 years has been this counterfeit use of fentanyl in narcotics. The problem with that is the pill makers can make mistakes. They give you a lethal dose of that narcotic that you think is a regular OxyContin.
Those being counterfeit drugs or pressed pills, which are pills sold as one drug but actually compromised of or laced with fentanyl. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, overdose by synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, have been on a sharp rise since about 2012, far outpacing other drugs. But whether you're seeking it out or ingesting it unknowingly, the risk is always the same.
We have a culture that, for whatever reason, wants to be high. Life doesn't get better after you're high. When you wake up, it's the same life that you were in.
And while drugs have always come with risk, when one pill can kill,
we're just one choice away of changing our lives forever. It could be good, can be bad. When you know it's bad, just say no and step away.
For BigCountryHomepage.com, I'm Noah McKinney.
Thank you, Noah. All the facts discussed in this story, as well as helpful links on how to talk to your loved ones about fentanyl and resources on overdose prevention and reversal, can be found on the KTAB website, BigCountryHomepage.com.
As Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis continues, join us on our ride-along with Anson Police. See what they see in the drug war.
Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, presented by Taylor Alliance for Prevention and Prevention Resource Center, Abilene.
An alleged drug dealer has been charged with murder after a fentanyl overdose in Abilene, and an accused drug dealer has been indicted for murder after an Abilene woman died of a fentanyl overdose within the last year. In February, Jarrell Russell was taken into custody on a warrant for a first-degree felony murder in connection with the death of Jesslyn Sturgill, who was found dead of an overdose inside an Abilene home in May of 2022. And just days ago, Frederick Hunter was indicted by a Taylor County grand jury for murder and delivery of fentanyl causing death in connection with the death of Joanna Nicole Bryant, who died of a fentanyl overdose in January 2023. In June of last year, Texas passed House Bill 6 that creates a criminal offense of murder for supplying fentanyl that results in death. Well, with the ever-increasing threat that fentanyl poses nationwide, many have suffered as a result of the deadly epidemic, with new litigations offering more severe punishments for those who are involved with the drug. Many put forth efforts to combat the destruction it has caused. Our frontline defenders in this threat are law enforcement agencies, and KTAB's Tobin Smith got a chance to ride along in this fight against fentanyl.
After viewing this, you may look twice at the car next to you on your next drive down the highway.
We've received intelligence which indicate that there's heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, marijuana traveling north and south on Highway 277. Also 180 runs east and west, and we understand that they're using 180 as well.
These rural roads serve as a major thoroughfare for traffickers hoping to avoid law enforcement on I-20, and Chief Dan Graziosi of the Anson Police Department describes how advancements in technology have aided them when dealing with fentanyl.
Just the way we search cars has changed since fentanyl has really become prevalent.
There's one on each side. They're high-speed license plate readers. I can pick up anything going 80 miles an hour over my speed.
On average, we're reading anywhere from 3,300 plates to 10,000 plates a day. And they can be entered by Border Patrol. They can put in suspected drug smugglers, people that have previous encounters as drug mules or known drug couriers. That information can be put into the LPR. And the LPR alerts the officer that they've encountered that car.
Officer Cole Rutherford of Anson PD allowed us the opportunity to ride along with him on his nightly patrol, where he describes not only how dangerous fentanyl is to consume.
What do you think whenever you're handling this kind of stuff?
Oh, I mean, it's scary. It's scary every time. It's a silent killer. That's the best way to describe it, because you never know. And you don't know, you could be driving down the road and accidentally touch your face with your hand and you're exposed to it.
From the street to the courtroom.
Fentanyl's been around forever. The problem is that fentanyl is touching the criminal community in a way that no other drug has ever touched in my years of experience.
Taylor County District Attorney James Hicks knows all too well the reach this deadly drug has when dealing with it in the courtroom.
Fentanyl is affecting all of the domestic violence situation. And we're dealing with families that are being destroyed because of drugs, opioids, and fentanyl specifically.
Meanwhile, Texas House Bill 6, which went into law last September, gives prosecutors like Hicks more teeth when going after fentanyl dealers.
If a dealer deals someone that ingests or introduces fentanyl into their body and dies, we can go after the dealer for murder. That is a perfect example of how fentanyl has gone beyond just the drug statute.
Although DA's offices across the state of Texas have a new weapon in this fight against fentanyl, the lethal drug is impacting state agencies across the board.
Our law enforcement is being overwhelmed by it, our child protective services and our family courts are being overwhelmed by it, and we've got to make a difference. We've got to control this issue.
But for Officer Rutherford and those like him, the effects can ripple beyond the criminal element.
With the scare of fentanyl, it's like everything's had to change. Like, I can't just walk in the house and go and like grab my kids. Usually before I can touch my kids, I have to go to a shower because you don't know what it is you're taking home.
From the DA's perspective, the message regarding fentanyl is clear.
We don't need another case to prosecute for a homicide or a domestic violence or any kind of assaultive behavior. We need to turn this community around and get them on a productive path away from the dealers of fentanyl and opioids.
For BigCountryHomepage.com, I'm Tobin Smith.
Coming up on Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, a new kind of vending machine distributing hope in the Key City.
Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, presented by Taylor Alliance for Prevention and Prevention Resource Center, Abilene.
To help combat the problem of fentanyl overdoses, the Abilene Recovery Council has brought a new kind of vending machine to the Key City. I spoke with a local nonprofit about how a grant is helping provide a life-saving solution that's now available in Abilene. That's the sound of a life being saved.
It helps our community, and we're able to partner with our other agencies to keep it filled. It's time to have one in Abilene.
What she's talking about is a Narcan vending machine now available in the Key City, used to reverse the effects of an overdose.
We've seen with the police department that they have seized fentanyl, they have seized opioids from different drug seizures, and so it's here, it's in every community.
Even the smallest amount of a drug like fentanyl is life-threatening.
Whether it's someone who buys a counterfeit pill from someone, or if a loved one accidentally takes a second dose of an opioid they've gotten from the doctor even, you can still overdose from a prescription medication.
After researching the perfect location, the Abilene Recovery Council settled on placing it in front of Book Therapy on Butternut Street. The owners quickly saying yes.
But it is something that's important. It's part of Christian values. It's we love each other, we love everyone, and take care of everyone.
Choosing a space where it reaches the most people.
It's within walking distance for a lot of our unhoused neighbors and a lot of people who are living in this area. It's a very easy access for them, and so we wanted to make it accessible as possible.
Community members proud to have a life-saving tool accessible to all.
We've had a large number of people from all different walks of life come into our used bookstore, and not a single person has had a bad thing to say about it. Everybody's asked about it, and once I've explained, that everyone has thought it has been a wonderful idea.
Every time someone is saved from Narcan, it's an opportunity to enter treatment and recovery.
And if this gives them that opportunity, then everything's worth it, and we've saved a family and a person's life. We want everyone to thrive and to be able to be a big part and a positive impact for our community. So why not save everyone's life?
The city of Austin welcomed its first Narcan vending machine in 2022, and since then, organizers have seen a decrease in overdoses. The Abilene Narcan vending machine is located at 1017 Butternut Street, but even those who don't live in Abilene may utilize the product. The machine available 24/7 and free of charge, and there is also a QR code that explains how it is to be used.
Coming up on Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, how we are protecting students from potential dangers.
Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis, presented by Taylor Alliance for Prevention and Prevention Resource Center, Abilene.
Well, it's back to school time in the big country, and administrators have been prepping for the new year, addressing topics like phones, dress codes, and opioid and fentanyl dangers and their potential presence in the education space. KTAB's Mariah Williams visiting local schools just as the semester begins.
School is almost in session for the big country, and while admin prepares for students' arrival, they are also keeping one important topic at the forefront: the dangers of opioids, especially fentanyl.
It can look like a gummy, it can look like a piece of candy, it can, different things can be laced.
With social media and endless possibilities at the fingertips of students, Allison Camp with Abilene ISD says it's important to keep the conversation open.
Our students are having to be more and more aware of these dangers just because it is the world they live in. We want to make sure they're prepared to know what to do, to know where to report, to know how to get help.
Thanks to a fentanyl education bill passed in 2023, prevention is required for grades 6 through 12, but the conversation should not end there.
Parents need to be aware. They need to be aware of what their kids are doing on social media. They need to be aware of the lingo and the emojis and all of the other things that the kids are using to access drugs.
At Premier Schools, nurse Christine O'Shields has fentanyl education as one of her top concerns, having decipher charts in her office and teaching the students life-saving measures.
I show them how to use the Narcan. I teach them how to use the Narcan. And I tell them that there are places in the community that they can go and they can have Narcan on hand. And all you have to do is you have to take it, put it up their nose, and squirt. That's all there is to it. It's in the they don't need it's in everything. So we kind of try and keep a close eye.
With prevention in the spotlight, educators are doing their best to protect students from one bad decision that could cost them their life. Reporting in Abilene, with coverage you can count on, I'm Mariah Williams, KTAB News.
Well, thank you for joining us for our special broadcast, Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis. If you or someone you know is in need of help, be aware that there are resources available to help. We have a full list of resources on the KTAB website, bigcountryhomepage.com, on the tab Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis. That's it for now, but our Bob Bartlett and Joni McKinnon sat down with local health officials, social agencies, and local enforcement to learn more about how the fentanyl crisis is affecting our Big Country community. Watch that conversation on the KTAB website, bigcountryhomepage.com. Again, thank you for joining us. Good night, and God bless.
Seven out of 10 pills that we find during traffic stops, there's going to be fentanyl, some amount of fentanyl in those.
Fentanyl is touching the criminal community in a way that no other drug has ever touched in my years of experience, and we've got to put an end to it.
It's the leading cause of accidental overdoses in the United States.
To even suspect your kids of doing drugs, intervene.
Thank you for staying with us in our continuing coverage, Confronting the Fentanyl Crisis. I'm Bob Bartlett.
And I'm Joni McKinnon, and we have several special guests joining us tonight as we move into providing more information during this exclusive program about Big Country Homepage and the fentanyl crisis. So our guest tonight, we'd like to introduce you, Taylor County Sheriff Ricky Bishop joining us. Thank you. The Program Director at Abilene Recovery Council, Cindy Frazier. Dr. Gary Holland, Taylor County Health Authority, Kelly Bankin, the Administrator of Citizens MS, Callahan County, and of course Nolan County District Attorney Ricky Thompson. So thank you. Welcome tonight.
And we thank you all for being here for this serious conversation, honestly. For those who may need a little background on what fentanyl is and why it's causing such a crisis, let's get some of the basics out of the way first. Turn to you, Dr. Holland. As a medical professional, explain what fentanyl is and why do people use it?
It's a synthetic opioid, so opioids are painkillers, analgesics. It's very potent. It's used, it has some legitimate uses. It's manufactured duragesic patches that sometimes people wear. We use it in hospice because sometimes people can't swallow medications or they're on something that doesn't work. So it's legitimate usage, but it's being used, it's being manufactured by labs that are not controlled, not pharmaceutical companies, Mexico, China, and put into pills. It's been laced into legitimate pills like hydrocodone, oxycodone, also illegitimate meds like heroin and morphine. And the reason is that it's very cheap and it allows the drug dealers to reduce the cost of their pills but still get the people high. And it's very, very effective. It's like 50 times as potent as heroin and 100 times per milligram as morphine. So for the people that are manufacturing it illicitly, it's a wonderful thing that helps their bottom line.
Cindy, so what do you see in here at the Recovery Council? I mean, you're dealing with these people and you're trying to prohibit it from going further.
True. Our assessment and referral for treatment program, anybody that comes in with any type of opioid use disorder, they really kind of just go to the front of the line as far as assessment and getting them into treatment. We know that they really are going to need the quickest response, and so we're trying to work with them. And then we always try and just meet people where they are in their recovery walk, and so our recovery coaches will walk the path that they want, because everybody's recovery may look different, and so they just try and make it work for them and for their life. And then we do a lot of prevention education in the community.
Kelly, turning to you next from the EMS position from Callahan County. Someone in the county calls 911 for help. How do your crews know what they're responding to, and do they not know until they get to the scene, and what do they do after that?
We're normally dispatched, and it gives us an idea if they have an overdose or if they're unresponsive. But until we actually get on scene to assess that patient, we really don't know. And the signs and symptoms that we look for with a fentanyl overdose or an opioid overdose would be if the patient is unconscious, if they have agonal respirations or shallow breathing. if they're snoring respirations as well, and pinpoint pupils, as well as cyanosis to the lips.
So your people have to go through training to figure all this out, to be able to spot that when they get there.
That is correct.
Yeah. Where do your people go? Where do you get staff from?
We get staff from all over the big country. So from those who have EMT certifications, and we have our EMTs, we have our advanced EMTs, as well as our paramedics.
And just because you're dispatched to a situation and they presume it's one substance, like Dr. Holland said, if it's something that's been laced, you have to take those steps to see past what you've been told and pick up on the clues for anything else.
That is correct, and that comes with our full assessment of that patient.
A lot of parents around the table, and we were all fearful. I have a teenager myself, and I mean, the thought of our kids coming across this drug in any way, shape, or form is just terrifying. I know it is to me and to other parents out there. So, I mean, how do you know if it's laced with fentanyl? I mean, what can it look like? Are there different forms? Cindy, do you know?
That's the problem with some of this is fentanyl it takes such a small amount to be a potentially lethal dose. Equivalent to 4 to 6 grains of table salt would fit on the tip of a pencil. And so you can't see it that it's in there. You can't taste it. You're not going to know it until you've ingested it, until you possibly go into an overdose. And because every of those counterfeit drugs are all different, one might have very small amounts of fentanyl, one might have enough to put you in an overdose that's survivable, and some of them may have an amount that is not survivable.
That gets back to Dr. Helen saying, you know, they're cutting this with other drugs, and it's not it's not a lab, there's no regulations to it.
Exactly. It's safe to never take anything that you didn't get from a pharmacy or you didn't get from a prescription.
I mean, anything at all.
Anything at all.
Because because a friend gives it to you, they may not know what's actually in that gummy or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because your friend bought it from somebody who's not going to represent this as if they're even selling you heroin or another pill, they're not going to tell you what's in it.
Even things like Adderall, which is a still controlled substance, but.
And I think that if the friend has a pill he's taking and he gives you the same pill, it may not have the same amount.
Exactly.
So, you know, you're just looking at trouble no matter what you do with it.
So don't take anything from anybody, I guess, huh?
Yes. That's the safest approach, and like we said earlier, unless it's doctor prescribed and you know what's in it, drug dealers aren't going to be forthcoming with what's in their drug. I think they're not going to tell you verbatim what's in there. It doesn't come with a label, and so they're selling you a product that they're trying to make money off of any way they can, and so they're not going to be upfront with that. And so the best way, like they're saying, to not do that is not to buy it and not take it from people and things like that. That's the safest approach.
Sheriff Bishop, your deputies out on the streets making traffic stops and responding to other emergency calls, what have they seen so far in this, just here in Taylor County?
So I'll expand it over to our narcotics division, where roughly 7 out of every 10 vehicles they pull over has some form of meth or fentanyl in that vehicle.
7 out of 10?
Yes. That's the stats they're coming up with so far. And just within the last 2 weeks, they made a traffic stop, got 1,000 fentanyl pills off of a man, and then was able to get a search warrant for his home and found another 4,000 fentanyl pills. And he was going to be a dealer for here in Abilene. And we were able to file on him through the federal system.
That's not someone moving through Taylor County. That's someone who is here.
He's living here, and he's selling these drugs to anybody and everybody that'll buy them.
How much money is there? How much did it cost to get the 5,000 pills, and how much money can he make off of that?
On average, they're buying pills for $5 a piece and then selling them for $25, $30 a piece. And Abilene has become the hub for this area for selling just about any drug you can find, because it all passes through here, goes to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, gets cut, gets split up, however they do it, and then people from here drive there, or the guys from Dallas-Fort Worth area are driving here to sell it, and then they drive right back. And then everything gets dispersed from Abilene to the surrounding big country from there.
And there's no way to really track who those people are, is there?
Just through lots of investigations.
Yeah.
And, you know, like that one is going to yield more arrests just off of that one guy. And, you know, I've got 6, 7 guys that work closely with the federal system, Abilene Police Department, and other agencies, and, you know, they're knocking it out of the park doing what they can. But until something happens at the border and shut that down as much as possible, it's going to keep growing. It's not going to slow down.
Because they're moving up straight from the border to Abilene as well.
Correct.
I mean,
So that, yeah, it's all coming across the border.
All coming across the border.
Made in
Mexico. Some of your fentanyls, or a lot of it's coming out of China, getting produced in labs there, goes to Mexico, gets pressed into the pills and different things there, added into whatever, and then it gets brought up here. And then we've even had a few that are here in Abilene pressing and making those pills themselves, and just in homes here, manufacturing them themselves.
Do you see that in your courtroom in Nolan County? How many cases do you deal a lot with this?
We deal with a lot of illegal substances. I mean, I would say 90 to 95% of our caseload can be tied to some form of drug use in itself. And Sheriff Bishop's right, it is being saturated. The market is being saturated with methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, just because it's coming across the border and it's just being released on the streets. And so the amounts are going up, the cost is going down. Like anything, you have a lot of a product, the cost is going to go down. And so we're seeing a lot of it. And so, yeah, I would say our caseload, I mean, over the past 8 to 9 years have increased at least by 40%.
Well, we see those busts that are made in Nolan County. We see them in conjunction with Taylor County working together for that. So once you have this bust and you have these individuals and they're in jail, I mean, do they go to therapy? Do they go to prison? What happens with this next? I mean, and how do we? Is that just the tip of the iceberg?
I think the approach we have taken is, you know, the demand you have to hit and the supply, and I think you have to treat it differently. I think the supply are the drug dealers. I think in my approach is the people who are feeding off people's addiction, they need to go to prison. I think that's my approach. I think people that are actually struggling with drug addiction, as far as the demand side of it, we do take an approach to try to get rehabilitation, because if we're able to rehabilitate that individual or get them help, I think that can save us a lot of issues in the long run, you know. And so we do seek rehabs. We have a drug court program at Nolan County that post-adjudication, meaning that they pled guilty and they go into this program and try to get counseling and things like that. And so, and one of the requirements to get into that is that you can't deal drugs. And so, and if they're known drug dealers, they don't qualify for that. And so it does take a two-step approach for that. I do know we've utilized a lot of if we're able to tie it to multiple individuals who are sharing money, engaging in organized criminal activity is a big law we use in my area, because it bumps the degree up on drug dealers. And it carries parole issues as far as half time served instead of quarter time served. And so those are creative ways we try to keep them in longer. In that way they're not out dealing in the streets. But I think it is a two-step approach, dealing with the supply and the demand differently.
Have you seen an increase in Taylor County?
Oh yeah, over the last couple of years, it's definitely increased. And even heroin's made a pretty good comeback in this area. And some of it is because those that want to get off fentanyl, the after effects are so strong that they go on to heroin, because the withdrawals are so much less on heroin than they are if they just quit fentanyl cold turkey. So they'll get on the heroin and then just quit heroin cold turkey after that, if they don't jump on the meth and stay on that. So, but meth and fentanyl are two biggest drugs in this area right now.
So they're all really interconnected.
Oh yes, definitely.
You know.
All right. So Kelly, when you guys do go out on these calls, I mean, if you think it's a fentanyl overdose, I mean, and you take the necessary precautions, what are you looking for? I mean, and how can you bring someone back if you think they've overdosed, and what are the next steps and once you arrive on the scene?
If we do suspect a fentanyl overdose or an opioid type overdose, we do use Narcan on scene. And we do transport the patient because they can always relapse back into that overdose from the use of either whatever opiate they used or fentanyl.
So this Narcan that we're seeing out here that's available, it's being made available, thankfully, that's not the end of the line.
No, it is not.
And just because you administer a dose and the person comes back, they're revived, that doesn't mean that they're out of the woods.
It does not. No, they have to call 911 so we can actually monitor that patient, bring them to the facility. And they need further medical treatment, it sounds like. Yes.
Dr. Holland, what are the signs of an overdose? How does if it's a family member or a friend, know that there is an apparent overdose situation?
Well, it depends on the drug. Like Kelly was saying, there's opioids, and then fentanyl is kind of a super drug. So just basically opioids make you sleepy, you kind of get high, you might get drowsy. But the fentanyl, because it's so potent and depresses the respiratory drive, makes you breathe slower. You start to gurgle when you breathe. You're not getting the air in and out. You may have pallor or cyanosis of your fingers or toes. Just lose consciousness completely. Some people just pass out and quit breathing. So it's a severe decrease in neurological function. And so anybody that's really out of it, loss of consciousness, limp, going limp, passing out, you have to wonder if it's something really strong like fentanyl, as opposed to just too many hydrocodone or codeine or something. Mm-hmm. So, and that could be due to other things besides drugs. So anybody that's having a decreased level of consciousness needs immediate treatment. If you think it could be fentanyl, then the Narcan is a great thing. They'll wake up for a while. They may even be mad at you for I've heard stories of people on a really good high, and they feel awful because if you're coming off of an opioid, you feel pretty bad for a while. But then they can go back into the sedation also. They need immediate medical treatment. But the idea is to recognize it might be an overdose, use the Narcan, and look for mainly signs of decreased level of consciousness is what we look for.
Well, as a doctor, what do you do when they show up in the emergency room?
Well, it depends on how bad off they are. If their respirations are poor, they'll first put them on oxygen. If it's really poor, they'll put a tube down their throat and use the ventilator. If they haven't had Narcan, they'll certainly get Narcan. Try to support their blood pressure.
How do you know if they've had Narcan or not?
Well, you don't know.
Oh, okay.
If you think they might have had.
Okay.
If it looks like it, that's a good point.
Okay.
Give them the Narcan. You mean if they've had Narcan?
Yes.
Well, I think.
Would you give them another dose? Does that make any difference?
If you're not sure, it's safe. You can't really overdose on it. If there's no history of having had it, you would probably give another dose. But just depending on their level of consciousness and their vital signs, however much help they need until you're pretty sure that it's all worn off. So you have to be really diligent and look closely.
And fentanyl is used in the hospital. I mean, it is a good drug.
It's a good drug. It can be used IV. I think there's even legitimate pills, but I haven't seen that being used. The main thing I'm seeing is the Duragesic patch, which is a very good patch. The beauty of fentanyl is there's just enough in the patch. It takes 12 to 24 hours to get into your system, but it's smooth and it stays in your system as opposed to taking hydrocodone or something. You kind of go up and down with your pain relief. So we love it with hospice patients and some patients maybe in chronic pain because it works, it stays in, they don't have to take pills, and it's kind of smooth. But the legitimate use is not the problem, it's the illegitimate use. And
so a person in the hospital kind of out of it hearing the word fentanyl should not, if you're in a hospital in a controlled situation, that's okay.
Yeah, and there have been people actually take fentanyl patches and cut them and chew them up, and it goes right through your oral mucosa. So, I mean, it's still a dangerous drug, even in a legitimate patch, but it has legitimate uses. We'd hate to not have it available.
Yeah.
The lengths that people will go to get this drug, and at the same time,
you're desperate when you're an addict.
Of course, you said they come out of it mad, angry that you've saved their life.
Yeah,
essentially.
I mean, I would take the doctor's use. I wouldn't. You definitely don't want to go outside what your doctor's telling you to use the fentanyl. I mean, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, people put on more than one patch.
Yeah.
however many they can get.
So Cindy, for someone who's experiencing, or whether it's them or someone they're close to, and they're going through an addiction to it, and maybe they're reacting to the drug, what would you?
As far as going through a substance use disorder, one of the biggest things we try and educate on is reducing that stigma of, we don't use words like addict or junkie. They have a substance use disorder, they have an opioid use disorder, they have an alcohol use disorder, because if we reduce that stigma of them feeling like that's who they are, they're more likely, we have found, to seek treatment. If this is just one part of who they are versus they're not just an addict.
There's more to them.
They're a person. We try and talk to people if they see somebody in a hospital or an emergency situation. Look beyond the overdose, because there could be some other traumas or other things happening in their life that has brought them here, or they've been given something they weren't aware of. And so you have to look beyond that overdose. And if they are using something that they're buying and using, we want to reduce that stigma so we can get them into some treatment and get them into recovery. So they will be a great part of our community. We want people to survive and be, prosperous and be an asset to our community.
Advocate for better wellness.
Yes.
I'd like to point out, counseling and all is very important, before drug use and after. There also are medications, and there's some local, the West Texas Counseling and Rehab Center uses methadone, which is a sort of a lower level opioid to reduce cravings and help people get off the opioid. It has to be under a controlled setting with physicians. And then buprenorphine is another partial opioid agonist that's used to help people that are on the really strong stuff, bring it down, help them get off of it slowly in a controlled setting. So there's medications that can help.
Yes.
It's not like you necessarily have to go cold turkey, but between medications, counseling, and all that together, it's
can be very effective.
So there is a way out of it.
Yeah, it's difficult. Nobody's going to tell you it's not difficult.
Yeah.
But somebody who wants to change can get help.
Sheriff, I think Joni alluded to it earlier. Why are people selling drugs to people who are dying, which seems like it would be killing off their clientele?
This is so addictive, they'll just go out and get new clientele without any problems. The only thing they care about is making money for themselves and making money for the cartels back in Mexico, so they can expand, their riches and their organizations, so they can be the leaders. It's unfortunately, they don't care what they do. They just want the dollar.
The rational mind seems like it's very counterproductive. if we're going to sell this drug that's potentially lethal, one, why would you take it if you thought you could die from it? And two, why would you sell something that you potentially are going to lose a client or customer because of that?
Yes.
And so you're referring to the Mexican cartels. So they are here?
They are here in Abilene, yes. Yes, we have linked some people back to, like the number 2 guy, back to the cartel in Mexico.
It's not a Hollywood made-up story.
No, it's not. They are here, and they are doing everything they can to make as much money as they can any way they can.
As law enforcement in your case and in the courtroom, how do we stop it?
You've got to get a handle on the border, which will slow some things down to where we can try to get a handle on our end, and also being able to modify laws where they can prosecute people for murder because they've been poisoned and don't know it.
When did that just started, right?
It's September 1st of 2023, so it's
Okay.
nearly been a year
Yeah.
that's came in. That was that last legislative session that came into work, and we've actually utilized it at least in 4 different cases since then. But it's a pretty broad statute. Just giving someone drugs and they overdose and die from that. That is a broad statute. When you look at it's just an extra paragraph in the murder statute under that section. And the other sections deal with intent and knowingly, and this is just, hey, you give somebody that, and it's laced with different narcotics, and they die from that issue, then you can charge them with that.
Has that been publicized enough, or do they care?
I don't think they really care, because some of them don't think they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
Especially those that are driving in from Dallas-Fort Worth to sell their drugs here, and they go right back. They don't think it'll get back to them. But
Cindy, you talked about the new statute and it being now considered a murder charge. I mean, because it's essentially poisoning. I mean,
Right.
but that's not the languaging we've been hearing along with this. Although we're glad the charge is there, but I think when people understand that you're poisoning another person, it raises the level of seriousness in a lot of our minds.
Right, and that we've changed that terminology when we do presentations. We don't call them an overdose death necessarily. It's a poisoning death because the people taking it did not know they were taking fentanyl. And so that changes, it kind of changes the way somebody will look at it if I overdose versus I was poisoned. Yeah. Your family member was poisoned. And that takes a whole different perspective on their death.
Especially if it's of a controlled substance, that perhaps that they thought they knew the dosaging or how much. I mean, because the fentanyl, when it's laced into it, there's no control over that. And so
and that's the big issue because they're taking an amount of something that's given to them that they're
presuming
built up over time, a tolerance that they can use even more than what they've started with, right? Because they've used over time. Well, they're not anticipating that extra lacing of another drug in there. And so their body's not used to that drug as they are the other drugs. And so that's why the adverse effects happen, is it's just they're taking an amount that they think is just one drug that they've tolerated and they're able to use, and they know they're able to use, but it's laced with other drugs, and fentanyl being one of them. And a lot of fentanyl, because just a little bit of it, but they're adding so much to it, it's just shooting the levels really high.
And there's a difference between people, some people who've been on some sort of opioid, legitimate or otherwise, will tolerate fentanyl better than somebody who's opioid naive, which means that people who are opioid naive need to be especially careful about getting a hold of something, because they're much more liable to be overdosed and really sick from it than somebody whose receptors are already.
I mean, Kelly, you said you obviously you have Narcan on hand, but Sheriff Bishop, I mean, your officers have it on hand too. I mean,
yes.
Carrying and having Narcan accessible seems to be, I mean, just the way of the future.
It's unfortunately, yes.
Well, now, so your deputies are trained to use Narcan if they think that it's appropriate in that situation.
Correct.
But they're calling 911 or radioing back for an ambulance.
Yeah, we've always got an ambulance coming, and you know we had a call not too long ago in Ty where a guy was unresponsive and they weren't sure what happened to him. I believe he was an employee at one of the truck stops, and they get there and they immediately, I think they ended up giving him 3 or 4 different doses of Narcan before he came to, and he actually started fighting when he came to. Because he didn't know he didn't know he'd been on the floor. He didn't know they'd already been doing CPR on him. And then we found out that he had actually taken some heroin that somebody had given him about 2 hours before.
So you have Narcan. We've got the vending machine now in the Recovery Council. Where else can we get Narcan? Is it accessible? Is it just, I mean, do we only not call 911? How do people get their hands on it?
It's very accessible. You can buy it over the counter. One thing I wish that Texas would do and other states do is they offer some states offer Narcan with every opioid prescription. I wish that Texas, that's my pie in the sky dream, is that Texas would do that someday. I'd love to see the legislation come on that. But the Abilene Health Department provides Narcan for free. Our agency provides it. It's available in several different ways in the vending machine. I know that just this morning we had to refill the vending machine again.
Already?
So we've refilled it twice. We've refilled it 3 times since 4th of July weekend.
And which is how many?
Approximately about 40 doses. Every box has 2 doses. So if you're getting a box out of the vending machine, you have 2 doses. They're 4 milligrams apiece. And so you can give a total of 8 milligrams of Narcan if needed for the person.
It might be something that somebody that's on chronic pain medication, an older person, something especially strong like hydrocodone, which we've used in the past and it's still good for pain, would want to have on hand just in case somebody got confused or decided to take more than they should. Have Narcan on hand just because it's a possibility if that kind of medicine's
Didn't
in the
know that
house.
they'd already taken their dosage.
Right. They just forget.
Is Narcan new? Is that
relatively new? I'm not sure how long it's been around. It's naloxone is the chemical name. But
it's something we're seeing on hand, like you said, with our officers or with EMTs. Even schools are starting to keep it on campuses.
Yes, their schools are keeping it on campus. Just whether it be a student that needs it, somebody coming into the school, somebody attending a football game. Some of them are keeping on their buses when they're transporting students, because you just never know where you're going to come across somebody. And if you're able to save their life, then it's worth to have it right there and handy.
Well, this has been an interesting, wonderful, informative conversation. Before we wrap things up, do want each of you to put in a final thought. We'll start with Sheriff Ricky Bishop, also Chief of the View Volunteer Fire Department.
I think the biggest message that needs to get out there to everybody is do not take something that you don't get prescribed or you buy over the counter from the store. If you don't know where that pill comes from, you don't take it. You don't know what's in it, where it came from, and that person that's giving it to you may not know either. So stay away from it and take only your own medications.
Okay, thanks, Sheriff. And Cindy Frazier, Abilene Recovery Council Program Director, your final thought.
I think that the biggest thing that we try and get across is that I feel really personal about is that if you're able to revive somebody from an overdose from Narcan, you're giving them the opportunity to get into treatment, into recovery. And it's never wrong to use Narcan. It will never hurt anyone. No one will ever go in an overdose. And get educated. And we're here to provide any services, and all of our services are free.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm glad to know that it can be used on anyone safely at any time.
Dr. Gary Holland from the Taylor County Health Authority.
Yeah, I think in my mind, education is so important. You know, before the fact, after the fact, before people overdose, to know that pills are dangerous, any kind of pill, especially something that you don't know what it is. Just kids especially that don't know any better maybe needs to be educated as much as things like what you're doing here. And then after the fact, someone who's addicted to opioids, opioid use disorder, or has a history of addiction or has overdosed before, knowing that there's a lot of help available. There's counseling, there's cognitive therapy, and there's also medications that can help, which are a little bit more difficult to get. But there's things to be told to the public before and after the fact, and the more we can get out the message, the better off people will be, and the more chance we have to maybe save somebody's life. So.
Very good. And Kelly Badigan from the Citizens EMS in Callahan County, final thought from you.
My final thought is definitely call 911 if you do suspect a fentanyl overdose. Even if you did administer a Narcan, we're still there to help, and continue to stay safe out there, really.
And Ricky Thompson.
Yeah, don't call me Richard.
District Attorney in Nolan County.
I think of this, and it's come from a couple of trials I've done like this, is a lot of individuals who might be with an individual who might be experiencing a fentanyl overdose and is in crisis. They're scared to call because maybe they have drugs. They might have illegal narcotics on them. They might be worried that they're going to get in trouble. In my area, and I maintain this, I even used it told in a closing argument, that it would go a long way for me, and I think in law enforcement in general, if you save a life, if you sit there no matter what selfish reasons and you put those aside and you look at that person, because it is a human being, and you say, I'm going to call and I'm going to save their life no matter what's in here, I think law enforcement and prosecutors would look at that and be like, you know what? That goes a long way. That is not going to carry a punishment like it would with just letting them die. And so that's my final thought. If people are out there and they think, I can't call because I have these narcotics on me, I've been breaking the law, to me, that would go a long way, and that might even be charges not filed, that you saved a life. And let's get you treatment, let's get you help, let's get them help, and we can save 2 lives in that process. You just letting them die, not calling, that's 2 lives gone. And to me, that means a lot if you could just step up and say, hey, I'm going to save a life today.
Okay, bottom line, somebody is watching this right now, who do they call? Who do they call for help?
What's the first call?
Cindy?
I mean, in an overdose situation, 911's your first call.
Okay, all right.
I mean, and if you need treatment or medicated treatment or a treatment facility, we are here. There are several other agencies in town. If you have a mental health issue, Betty Hardwick is our local mental health authority. But education is the key. You know, we have Tucker's Law now that's requiring education for our 6th through 12th graders on opioids. It's all that education.
Is that soon enough? Is 6 through 12?
That's the most maturity level.
Okay. Okay.
And we do prescription drug safety with younger kids, but opioid education starts at 6th grade.
Okay.
And you can go to churches. Any churches are going to have avenues that you can get help to.
Yes.
Churches, nonprofit. I mean, they're all over. There's a bunch of nonprofits that will guide you to the resources that you need. And these counties, I work in the counties in Taylor County. All these counties have people that care. If you just reach out and ask for it, and I think any minister, any nonprofit, any of these people will guide you in the process to get help. Yeah. And the first road is just saying, I need help. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people are concerned that they have some drugs in the house and they don't want the law enforcement involved.
Yeah.
Very enlightening. Thank you to all of you, Mr. Thompson. Thanks to all of our guests for continuing this education and the conversation that we're having, that a necessary conversation that we can't stop having. We need to continue this as well, that we must have on confronting the fentanyl crisis.
It appears to be a problem that we'll have for a while, but KTAB and Big Country homepage will continue to cover it as we have been doing tonight. Do want to thank our production crew, the KTAB News Department and Engineering for helping put all of this together, and for McMurray University for allowing us to use their beautiful new Garrison Student Center for this recording tonight. We thank you very much.